Hey everybody, Eric Jackson here. Down here at one of my local spots, Center Hill Lake on the Caney Fork River in Rock Island, Tennessee. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is the basics of kayak fishing. Here's all the skills that you need to know to get out on the water safely, to be able to maneuver your boat, to be effective catching fish, and to have a good time on the water confidently. We're going to start right at the beginning. First, when it comes to kayak fishing, there's a lot of types of kayaks out there. Most kayaks are made out of rotomolded plastic. What we're looking at here is the Apex watercraft here. It's carbon fiber, super lightweight and high performance. It is absolutely not necessary to have a super high-end kayak like the Apex in order to have fun on the water. However, if you want to maximize your fun, of course, having the best equipment is always the way to go. Now, let's start from the very beginning. The most minimal amount of things that you need for kayak fishing. You should have, of course, a PFD, and you should have it on. It doesn't do any good if you're not wearing it. Many states have a rule that you have to actually be wearing it. Some states only require you to bring it with you. I'm going to recommend you wear it, but it's not only for safety. It's a good place to keep your phone, other stuff. You've got pockets. It is something that will keep you safe, and you can use it as an accessory tool as well. Second thing you're going to need is a paddle. Now, paddles come in all shapes and sizes. They come in different lengths. They come in different materials. This, of course, is top-of-the-line kayak paddle. This is a Lendl Strike. Strike, as it's my fishing kayak. It's one that I helped design. It is bent shaft, carbon fiber, super lightweight. It is top-of-the-line. The most important parts about selecting a paddle, you do not need to spend, this is a $600 paddle, you don't have to spend $600 to get a good paddle. You can get a good paddle for under $200. If you're spending under $100, you're going to be struggling. It's not a good idea. I highly recommend you spend at least $200 on a paddle, $180 being the minimum. That way you're getting a fiberglass blade, a composite shaft instead of aluminum. So it's lighter, but it also doesn't flex like crazy when you're stroking, and you can actually get places easier. Now, this paddle is adjustable, and it is adjustable in length. It goes from 240 to 245. The length of your paddle has more to do with how high your seat is off the water. If your seat is down in the water, well, then you're not in a fishing kayak. Meaning if your seat is at water level, you're not in a fishing kayak. But if you are in that kind of a boat, you're going to want a shorter paddle, so like 210 centimeters. If you have an elevated seat, you're going to need a longer paddle. In this case, the Apex watercraft here has a very elevated seat. You're sitting high above the water, so you can see in the water. You're in a comfortable position, but you need a longer paddle. This is a 240. 240 to 250 is the right length. And that is important, by the way. Otherwise, you're going to be struggling like, why can't I reach the water? Or why is this paddle too long? So that's the length of the paddle. So now you got a PFD, a paddle, obviously a kayak. Now, kayaks, like I said, come in all shapes and sizes. One of the things that's important about a kayak, if you're a 280-pound guy, you don't want to be in a little 10-foot narrow kayak. You're going to get in it, it's going to be like, man, this kayaking's not for me. And it's not you, it's the kayak is too small, too narrow, and not stable enough. If you are a 100-pound kid or a 100-pound woman, for example, and you're in a boat that's big and heavy, it's just going to be unwieldy and it's going to be too much for you. It's overkill. It's not going to be as fun. So a kayak that's the right size is really important. In this particular case, my Apex tier covers a wide range because it's so lightweight. It's only 40 pounds. So a 100-pound person can maneuver it and use it, but it's wide and stable enough for the big people. Now, speaking of weight, when it comes to kayaks, you really do need to think about the weight. Some of the most fishing kayaks with the most bells and whistles, they're 120, 150 pounds, some of the bigger ones. That's a lot of weight. Unless you intend to trailer your kayak and back into a boat ramp, you're not going to be able to get it to very many places. It's going to be hard to load, unload, get to the water, get out of the water, and put back away when you get home. So look at the weight of the kayak. The weight is really important. Of course, the lightest weight boat, a carbon fiber tier, is 40 pounds. It's less than half the weight of anything else out there. Definitely worth checking out. Okay, now the seats. We talked about elevated seating. If you're fishing from a kayak and your seat isn't elevated, you're going to be way challenged. When you're elevated, you can see through the water instead of seeing glare. You can see cover. It's a lot easier to fish, a lot easier to cast. You're more comfortable all day. And then from that seated position, most kayaks nowadays that are fishing kayaks are wide and stable enough to stand up on. And we're going to get into that. But having a boat that you can stand on is also very important. Standing and fishing, as you know, is a different experience than sitting and fishing. You can cast better, you can set the hook better.
There we go.
But you need to have a boat that's stable enough that you're comfortable with it. Now, you being comfortable standing and fishing in a kayak takes two things. It takes a little bit of balance and coordination. It means it takes a boat that's not too small for you, and it takes a little bit of practice. So when do you practice for standing fishing? Not way offshore in some windy, wavy, cold water in the middle of the winter lake, for example. Bad idea. Instead, you practice in a place like this. It's 80 degrees today. This water is 80 degrees. We've got a nice shallow beach. This is a swimming area. Perfect place to practice standing. And we'll get into that in a minute, standing up and sitting down. Other things you need rods, reels, you need your tackle. I'm a big fan of minimalist. You've got this nice lightweight kayak. You can go just about anywhere. It's easy to access things. What you don't want to do is then bring 30 pounds of tungsten and lead weights to put in the kayak if you're not going to use them for the day. Now, I'm a professional kayak fisherman on the U.S. team, fresh off a gold medal win in the World Championships. Won a lot of good tournaments, and this is my tackle box. It is literally, my point is, when I go out for a day, I try to identify in advance what I think the fish are going to be biting on, what I want to fish with. And instead of having a terminal tackle box, my spinnerbait box, and having a big crate and bringing 100 pounds or 80 pounds worth of gear, I bring something lightweight that's easy to access. I've got several tungsten bullet weights in here, some 5/0 hooks, some bobber stoppers. I've got some finesse jigs, a spinnerbait. I've got some swim baits. I got a jerk bait. I've got everything I need for lures that I would fish with today, except for my soft plastics that I keep in this Strike King speed bag, and this is where I keep my soft plastics. If it doesn't fit in a bag this size, it doesn't come with me on the day. So between this and this, you've got very minimal weight. It's easy to access. You've got quick access to your gear. You don't have to spend time looking for it. It makes loading in the morning and unloading in the afternoon or at night much easier. It streamlines your experience, and in my opinion, or my experience, it makes your kayaking just a lot more fun and your fishing more fun. You're spending less time loading and unloading and dealing with gear and more time fishing. So boom and boom, ready to go. Now in this particular case, I'm running electronics on this kayak. Here we are in a nice big lake. There's walleye down there, there's bass, there's drop-offs. Locating fish with electronics sometimes is easier. And in this particular case, I'm running Lowrance, and we'll get you, you can take a look. I've got this flush-mounted 9-inch screen, got a transducer on the stern, and ready to go. Now, being a tournament fisherman, today is July 1st. I'm fishing the Kayak Bass Fishing Challenge Series, so I've got my catch board here so I can catch and release some fish. I can catch and measure, and this is a staple for me as well if I'm tournament fishing. Last but not least, well, two more things. For equipment, I've got a GoPro mounted on the bow. There's a thing called the crotch shot that we try to avoid. Your goal should be, if you're going to put a GoPro pointed towards you, to have it on something that elevates it high enough that it's not shooting straight at your crotch. That shot is got a name called the crotch shot because so many kayak fishermen do it, and it's not an attractive shot. So I recommend using the GoPro gooseneck that lifts it up off the ground. You still have access to it. You can change the angle, and it gets a great shot for catching and releasing fish. I don't run my GoPro full time. When I catch a fish, I usually reach up there and turn it on. I'll do it something like this. This would be my fishing position. Boom, you get a good elevated spot. You can show off your fish. It's a really great way to get some footage. And of course, at any time you can turn it forward and point it forward off to the side or whatever. Finally, make sure you have something to keep you hydrated. In this particular case, I'm just coming out for a little bit. I got myself an AW root beer, and I got it in what I call the beer buddy, which is my cup holder for the Apex tier. And we're ready to go. Oh, rods and reels. How many do you bring? That's a good question. You've seen the kayak fishermen out there that have like 10 rods sticking up out of a crate behind them. They got stuff everywhere. And that's fine. You're totally welcome to fish that way. I find the rods get in the way of my casting. I absolutely despise having rods vertical. You can't paddle under branches. You can't go under that tree without catching your rod tips. When you go to do a back cast, you're at risk of hitting it. You can't do a straight overhead cast. There's a million reasons besides it's just a pain in the butt, and you don't need that much. Typically, I'll bring 2 rods if I'm comfortable with my fishing and I have a good idea what I want to do. I'll bring 3 or 4 max. And with the Apex tier, we'll show you how the rods lay down in here in a second. That should be good. I think you got everything you need. As long as you're not night fishing, you don't have to worry about lights or anything else. All right, let's go.